Hi, everyone. This is Carrie, and I'm back with day three of the Trezell and Jacqueline West trial. Wanted to give you guys updates on what happened today, key moments, so that if you're trying to follow the trial, you'll know exactly what's gone on from the. If you've missed my videos from days one and two, I do suggest you go back and listen to that as well. I also wanted to make one quick reminder to everybody. There's three different sets of attorneys here. You have the DA, Trezell West, the husband. His attorney is Hennessy. And then you have Jacqueline West, the wife, and her attorney is Torres Stallings. So just keep that in mind. I know sometimes when you don't have that visual, it's just, you're kind of like, who is this questioning now? Is this from the state? So I'll try to keep reminding you guys of this as we go along in the trial. Okay, so let's get started. They resumed the day with Officer Hanson back on the stand. And I'm going to be giving you guys some updates from the notes that I took, as well as some notes that another reporter that is inside the courtroom has taken. The video of the interview between Trezell West, Officer Brian Hanson, and an FBI agent resumed playing when they came back to court first thing this morning. And again, Officer Hanson is back on the stand. Hanson did confirm that he was present for the FBI interview with Jacqueline West. And Hanson confirmed that he did see chalk outside where the children were playing. They mentioned something about not being able to get some Nest footage, and I think that what they're referring to is the fact that the person does not have a paid subscription with Nest, so all it does is take like clips of when motion goes by. It's like really 1 and 2, 3 second clips. When he did try to contact the Nest Corporation to get more, but they were not able to give him any more information. Now the defense comes in and they're going to do their cross against Hanson, and he asked Hanson, "Do you know what a ruse is?" And they confirm it's an investigation technique. And he says, "So you're basically saying a ruse is when you have evidence, but you know it's a lie." Then Hennessy, the defense attorney for Trezell West, said, "So weren't you providing a ruse when you told them that you had all this footage and you were interviewing them at their kitchen table?" And he said, "No, I wasn't." Now, Mr. Dobbins is the one who owns the Nest camera. They stated that it probably picks up from 10 to 15 feet away, but they weren't sure, and only when motion goes by. And Hennessy wanted to make clear that so it would not pick up the lot across the street. And Officer Hanson said, "Well, no, not unless it was right on the street." And they talked about the ring camera that was at Mr. Chavez's home, and this is around the corner. And Mr. Chavez is a city employee. So that was kind of the same situation. He did not have a subscription to Ring, so they only reviewed small clips of the van going by. And Hennessy asked him to confirm that. He said yes. They must have pulled up a map of the neighborhood because then they're talking about, well, okay, so they're pinpointing where these cameras were within the neighborhood. And he goes back to the interview in the dining room with Trezell and Jacqueline. And he goes, "You don't think that that was a ruse?" And he said, "No." He said, "So you're going to tell them that there's no footage of him outside working. You're referring to the few clips from the Nest and the Ring camera. You believe that is no ruse?" And he said, "No." So apparently, when he was in the interview, he did say to them, "We have all kinds of uh, footage that the boys weren't out there." So that's why he was kind of leaning towards, well, isn't that a ruse? And Hanson said, "No, they picked up the dog walking outside. They picked up his van going back and forth, but there were never any children picked up." And then Hennessy goes, "Oh, well, so you didn't? They don't pick up the sidewalk?" And I thought this was kind of cool because Hanson came back and said, "There's not a sidewalk." And Hennessy was like, "Oh, well, I mean, walking the dog by the road." He said, "Well, did you look for any clips, any video clips from 4:30 to 5 p.m. that day?" And he said, "No, I don't believe I did." He said, "Well, did you look for any other cars before 4:30?" So you saw no cars going by. And he said, I don't believe I did. And he says, you've never watched video from the time in question from 4:30 to 5:30 on these cameras. And he said, no. He said, so when the dogs came in there and you told them that the dogs couldn't pick up any scent from the kids, that wasn't a ruse? And he said, no. He's like, well, these are cadaver dogs. The fact that they use cadaver dogs, is that a surprise to you? And he said, yes. And then Hanson said, well, I don't know what these dogs are trained for. And Hennessy said, well, it's a specific scent, right? You know, you're looking for something of a specific scent of Orin and Orson. Were you told that these dogs could track into the van to and wherever the van went to dispose of body parts? And that was kind of a weird thing. And he said they were just they were trying to pick up the scents of the kids, and they did not pick up the scents of the kids outside of the yard. All right. Then they jumped over to the sex offenders list. And he said, well, you know what the sex, he said, you know what this is, right? You know what Megan's Law is. And Megan's Law is that thing where you can go online and look up the predators around your area. He said, you know, it's to keep parents aware of where sex offenders live so their children are protected. And he's like, yeah, I know what that is. And he said, well, and you know that anyone that's not registered as a sex offender should be arrested, right? And he said, no, I didn't know that. And he said, well, have you done any of these arrests? He said, no. He said, well, what about, he said, I've done compliant checks. Henson said, I've done compliant checks. And then Hennessy said, well, there's 42 registered sex offenders in Cal City, or there were at the time. That night, you received a list of the sex offenders list. Okay. I guess he says, okay, I did. A lot of what Hennessy's questioning was, and as I'm making these notes, I noticed that Hennessy was, it was almost like he was testifying. It wasn't as that they were questions. The first night, you don't know, you don't go to follow up on this list. And he said, no. And then Hennessy says, well, okay, so you took Trezell's gun, correct? He said, yeah. He said, and you looked for footprints in the dark. You took pictures. And, you know, of course, he says in the dark. You took pictures outside. You questioned the West. He goes, okay, so then the next day, you don't again investigate the sex offenders list. He said, no. Okay. Third, fourth day, you don't investigate the sex offenders list. No, I didn't. Okay. On the 11th day, 11 days later, is when you first look at the sex offenders list. He said, yes. And he goes, okay. He wanted to search, Hanson, he wanted to search the sex offenders and find info to search their homes. And he said, that's exactly what I was trying to do. He said, you went to 6 houses then. He said, I believe so. And 2 of the homes you spoke to someone. Yes. But they weren't the actual sex offenders. No, I don't believe they were. And then the other 3 um you didn't go to. He said, okay, so then one of them said that you had the wrong address, correct? And he said, yes. He goes, and that was your end of the investigation on that piece? And he goes, yeah. It's very confusing the way, I mean, they were going fast too. Okay, so then he said, did you ever follow up on that wrong address? And he said, no. He said, well, in your report, you didn't provide details about who you spoke with at these homes. So he's pinpointing the fact that his police report was only a little over a page long, and he felt like he should have gone into more detail with each of those people he spoke to at these homes and the addresses and all that. He said, what is a 1015? And he said, well, it's an arrest. He said, didn't you tell Trezell to go fuck himself? You don't remember saying that? You don't remember hearing that on your body cam footage? And he goes, I don't believe I said that. And he said, well, Mr. West asked you to leave. Mr. West asked you to leave the dining room table. And as you were leaving, you don't remember saying, go F yourself? And then he said, I don't think so. I don't recall that. So then they make him pull up his notes, right? And then Hennessy comes back and says, "Oh, I'm sorry. You told him to get the f out of here." Yeah, I think I did say that. And when Mr. Trezell West told you that he had concerns that you were not taking things seriously, you weren't taking it seriously because of the kid's color. At that point, you wanted to 10:15, you wanted to arrest him. And Hanson came back very matter of factly and said, "Yeah, I did. Absolutely, I did." The defense made a point that Hanson had said he canvassed the area for the missing children. He did get out of the car. However, he did not remember where he got out of the car. And according to Hanson, he reviewed the video footage after he was canvassing. He did not report this on his police report. Okay, so going back to the cadaver dogs, Hanson had said he did not believe that the search dogs were cadaver dogs, but he wasn't sure what they were trained in. And Hennessy says, "Oh, well, were you surprised to find out that they were cadaver dogs?" And Hanson confirmed that he would be surprised if he found that out, as he thought they were search dogs. So that kind of clears that up a little bit. Hennessy asked if Hanson took the gun and gave it to Officer Flores to put in his back pocket. Hanson says he does not remember if that happened. Hennessy asked if Hanson looked into any sex offenders in the area for the first few days. "I don't know. I know I didn't," said Hanson. Then they gave him time to like stop and read the report, right? Okay. Now, Hanson's still on the stand, and Torres Stallings, the defense attorney for Jacqueline, begins her questioning. And she definitely, you guys, she was going after this cop for his inexperience. She really went after the way that he handled this investigation. She made it sound as if, and she did a really good job of it. She really kind of made him seem like he wasn't as thorough as he could have been. So here's what she does. "What, if anything, did you review before testifying?" He says, "Nothing." "Okay, so you didn't review your September 14th testimony?" "No, I didn't." "You didn't review your January 7th testimony?" "No, I didn't." "You didn't review your December 15th testimony. Could you have could No, I didn't." She said, "Well, couldn't you have received these?" He said, "Well, I don't know where I would have found them." She goes, "Well, you could have gone over to the DA and gotten the transcripts." And he said, "Oh, okay, yeah, I guess I could have." And then she touched on how short, again, his report was. And a lot of what she does is kind of just add on to what Hennessy had done in his cross. She asked him, "How do you communicate with dispatch?" And he said he did not have a police cell phone. And he told her he used his own cell phone. And she said, "Do you store all of the text and items on your cell phone that you use for your investigative work? Do you have that like stored in a separate area on your phone?" And he said, "No." And she said, "Well, so they're not stored like in an," and he said, "No." He goes, "But I've had 2 new phones since then." And she said, "Well, they aren't stored in like an iCloud or Google." And he said, "No." She said, "What's a 1096?" And he said, "That's when you make contact with dispatch and information is logged in via the CAD log. And that's like a real-time uploading of information." She said, "You could do a record check on someone, correct? You can run addresses?" And he said, "Yes." She said, "So on December 21st, there was a residence off of Harvard that was on your body cam footage. You didn't physically wait." She said, "The residence on Harvard. There's no body cam footage of that." And he said, "You did." She said, You didn't physically go to that residence?" And he said, "No." And then she said something about his body cam footage being turned off. And he came back, Hanson came back and said, "Well, at the time, the body cam that we were wearing was not very good. It was bad. And they would shut off on their own and they turn on their own." She was trying to claim that he went over and did some work and he turned his body cam footage off on purpose. And She said, "There is no footage of you canvassing the area, correct?" And he said, "Correct." She said, "Do you know who you spoke to at the Harvard address?" And he said, "No." She said, "You never testified to visiting the residence on all these times you testified?" So apparently, in his previous testimony, that was never brought up, him talking to someone at this Harvard address. Only two houses had surveillance video. And now you're telling the jury there was surveillance at Harvard residence? He said, "No, I'm not." He's basically saying, "No, I answered the questions that you guys asked." So again, she goes back towards trying to make him look bad. She said, "So you don't have any formal footprint training, correct?" He said, "No, I don't." "And you don't know a lot about the cadaver dogs, the canines, and the training that they receive, correct?" "No, I don't." She said, "Okay, let's go to this diagram that you've drawn." She said, "Do you know that you could have gone to the county and gotten the same diagram and not having and rather than draw your own?" And he said, "No, I didn't know that." And she said, "Well, you had said you used a steel tape and a rolling tape for your measurements on this diagram. But in fact, didn't you use a household measuring tape?" And he said, "Well, a steel tape is the same as a household measuring tape." And she said, "Well, how long is that tape? How long does it go?" And he said, "Only 50 feet." And she said, "So you had someone helping you?" And he said, "No, I did it all by myself." She's just trying to make him look not credible. Then they start talking about CPS. And she said, "Have you contacted them before?" And he said, "Yes." And she mentions an emergency response log. Said that there was video footage of the boys walking down the street, possibly going eastbound. Guys, this is the first time I'm hearing this. I have no idea what she's talking about. So this was all a blur to me. She said, "Do you recall contacting CPS on December 2020?" He said he does not recall. They go back to the one of the Ring or Nest cameras, and they said that one of the cameras at Mr. Dobbins' house at 108 was the only one in his police report. But if you go back to the catalog, it states that Mr. Dobbins' info was entered at 12:20 a.m. This is the guy across the street, I believe. And so she's saying you didn't go over there and speak to him till 12:20 a.m. and you were on scene before 6 p.m. So basically, she's trying to say it took you 6 hours to get over there. And from what Hansen said, he wasn't home when he originally went over there the first time. So she continues to beat on these points of his lack of note taking in his police report. And they started reviewing photos inside the home. Now, this is something I mentioned yesterday, and it was confirmed today because I questioned this yesterday. There were, in fact, Christmas gifts under the tree for Orrin and Orson when they were searching the home and taking photos. And then she started going in. They talked about the pictures on the photos pretty thoroughly. She really kept pointing out that there were stockings and there were gifts for the kids, and just trying to make it sound like, they weren't expecting the kids not to be there. So then she started honing in on this child questionnaire that I had mentioned before. And these child questionnaires are basically like a checklist that they have to go through and to see if they meet the requirements that are needed for them to actually do like an interview with them. And let me go up to the notes because she was stating that he did not follow the requirements on these. She started asking about the diapers and the sizing, and Hansen said he's never bought diapers before. Hansen confirmed that he does not understand diaper sizing, and Torres Stalling said she referenced his testimony the day before on the diapers and the pictures that he took in the West home. Because the day before he had said, "Well, that I found that strange that they have children, but they wouldn't have diapers in the trash can." So Torres Stalling asked Hansen if he was aware that a detective found a used diaper nearly a year after the initial search of the home. Hansen said he was not aware of that. A year later? What? Then she comes up and she presents that used diaper photo to Hanson and asks if he had ever seen the diaper, and he said no, he had not. Then she starts showing some pictures of the garage, and he said, I don't remember it like that. Hanson is asked if he recalls seeing children's fingerprints on the windows and glass door. He said, I don't know if there were children's fingerprints. Which, guys, I'm kind of like, what does that matter? Because they have other kids. That doesn't tell you anything. Tora Stalling corrected herself to say little fingerprints instead, to which Hanson confirmed he had seen those. Hanson is questioned if he was aware that the consent form he used for the West children that were interviewed was only supposed to be used if the minor had committed a crime. So he said at the time that was the only form he had. And according to him, he said that he was in plain clothes and not in his police uniform when he interviewed the children. He does not remember if he had ever identified himself to the children as a police officer before he interviewed them. Taurus Stallings reviews the questions asked to the children, focusing on the questions: did you know if it's okay to kill someone? And do you know that it's wrong to help kill someone? She said there was a series of questions on the form that he skipped over and didn't ask them. He went straight to those questions. One of the children reportedly told Hanson that he did not know the difference between right and wrong, and the other child reported that he could not tell the difference between right and wrong. So, according to Torres Stalling, a third child had a hard time answering questions verbally. And that's when they resumed for lunch. When they came back from lunch, this really bothered me. Torres Stallings was reaching. I mean, she was reaching for the stars. And the first thing I thought of when she started doing this was, if I was on that jury, I would think to myself, if you're having to do this, then you really don't have any defense. But I don't, okay. So let's go here. And I'll show you kind of what I mean. So she's still questioning Officer Hanson. Bless his heart. He's on the stand for almost 2 days. And she's asking him about his interrogation tactics. And do you do this? Do you do that? Do you normally touch people in an interrogation? He said, no. She said, well, did you physically touch Jacqueline when you were interviewing her? And he said, yes. And then she came back and said, on her inner thigh. And he said, and Hanson replied, I touched her on her knee. They even went so far as to watch the video of when they're in the interrogation room. And basically, he's trying to console her, right? Before they brought the video up, her attorney says, do you recall moving your hand around? He said, no, I did not. Then the DA came back up and he pretty much cleared up. He goes, was there cameras in there? Yes, there were. There was no one in the room with you, but was there anyone watching? He said, yes, there was a whole bunch of people watching. And just kind of made it sound as ridiculous as it was. DA also came back and made a point to confirm that Ditch Dispatch had that Hartford address and they knew that he was going there. So then they called the next witness, which is a former resident of Cal City in that neighborhood. He lived on Aspen Avenue. He worked at NASA and he was a young married guy. He had seen T and J moving in. He went over and introduced himself to him when they were moving in, and he said there was one other person with them, but he did not see any kids. He said he did see kids when he went over another time to borrow an air compressor from Trezell, and he went to their front door. Trezell opened the door. He said there was kids that came to the door. There were kids playing in the background. And this is where it gets a little fuzzy for me because I had to run an errand, so I wasn't able to listen constantly to what was going on. The gentleman's name was Dobbins. Dobbins described the children that he had seen before at the West House as little ones, like hip height, and he confirmed that he is the owner of the Google Nest camera. He also confirmed that he was not home when CCPD first contacted him. According to Dobbins, the Nest subscription service only allowed still photos, so he had upgraded to a higher package after being contacted by CCPD about the footage, and so he was hoping that it would actually help them get more. He described the area that his Nest camera captures. Doesn't state it here. And he said that he had never informed Trezell that he owned a Google Nest doorbell camera. He says he took screenshots of the still shots from his doorbell camera and sent them to CCPD. Dobbin claims that the CCPD later came to Dobbins to try and retrieve the footage, and Dobbins provided his account email and password in order to help them with the search. A screen recording of a small clip from the Nest doorbell recorded off of Dobbins' Nest app on his phone is played for the court. A video of the West thanking Dobbins for food he had brought them after the boys went missing is played for the court. According to Dobbins, he had taken screenshots of each Nest video that was sent to his phone through the app. All right, now Hennessy, Trezell's attorney comes up and he says he's questioning the same guy. And on the night the boys went missing, he said that Dobbin tells him that he was at a family Christmas party. And Dobbin says that his original Nest subscription package only caught still photos. Short video clips were not taken until he upgraded his system, according to him. Dobbins does not know if he heard a TV or if he heard children at the West home, but he knows that he did hear adults. Now, Torres Stallings, who is the defense attorney for Jacqueline West, comes up, and Dobbins says that the children he saw were as tall as Trezell's hip. Trezell is made to stand up in the court for a reference. Dobbins described surveillance camera on other neighbors' homes. He described the various neighbors on his street, and he said Dobbins bought pizza and let civilians and police use his home and garage during the search for Orrin and Orson West. He answered questions about the civilian search as well as the media interviews that took place at the West House. According to Dobbins, he had witnessed someone drive to the West House and throw a brick through their window around 10 days after the boys went missing. According to Dobbins, he was also being harassed during the search with people going through his trash and entering his yard. He had to change his number due to unsolicited phone calls, and his grandmother was also harassed with phone calls. Good gracious. Law enforcement had contacted the Dobbins after he had moved to Texas in order to retrieve more information and take his phone in 2021, and Dobbins did not know what information they were retrieving. Dobbins is unaware if law enforcement followed up with Google Nest about his account. So then the court went on break, and then they bring up this elderly lady. Oh, you guys, I'm telling you, she was not a good witness. Just, and I didn't even hear her whole testimony, okay? I'm going to be honest. This woman. She's one of those who keeps an eye on her neighbors, if that tells you anything. She's no longer there, but she did live in the house that backed up to the West home. She lived there for 21 years. And she kind of came in and described to them how her house was set up and how her backyard was set up, and that even though they had a fence, there was a certain way that when they were sitting there, they could still see through the fence and see the backyard. They said they spent a lot of time out in the backyard. They did have a pool out there. She describes her discovery of the West moving in behind her home. She claims that she had never seen anyone or any animals aside from Trezell in the backyard. And she claims that her dog barked at a man going in and out of the gate at the West house, and she knew he was at least looking for something. So she said, I didn't see him bring anything in. She does not confirm if it was Trezell, though. Now, when she goes to describe this on the stand, oh my goodness, she's just a yapping. And she tells him, "Well, yes, of course I looked. I admit it. I'm nosy. I looked over the fence. I wanted to see what was going on." She said he was either collecting trash or wood. She did state too while she was up there, she said in her 21 years of living there, she had never seen a child in that backyard. And this was so odd. She said she saw Trezell's white van drive by. Okay. She said that she didn't know if that it was Trezell's white van, but she did see a white van drive by once the day the kids went missing. And they had asked her, who asked her? I forget who it was that asked her about her interviews because apparently she did two interviews. She does talk about the citizen search efforts. And she said she only assisted on the search for 1 day because she needs to care for her disabled husband. Okay, so I think it was tourist stalling that points out that Plant had previously told Detective Hernandez that she had not seen any law enforcement or people searching for 1 to 2 days after she had seen the man, Trezell, collecting wood. Plant told Hernandez previously on the record that she did see a dog, and she claims that she does not recall this. Torres Stallings was also poking on about her her eyesight because she was wearing glasses, and the lady said she was farsighted in both eyes, which means that she can't see close up. And of course, there was some. She said, "Well, did you give some interviews to the media?" And she said, "Well, I didn't know I was given 2 interviews, but she said there was 3 people that came to her house at one point. It was a young lady, and there was a guy with him that was holding up his phone. She didn't realize he was recording. And then she also had a second interview with the news media, and she said that she had never been interviewed by law enforcement.
But neighbors say they never saw any of the 6 children outside.
That there were never any children back there, and we're home 98% of the time. They didn't even have any animals there. If they had animals in that house, they weren't in the backyard either.
For Paula Thompson, it did not come as a big surprise to her that the people arrested were the adoptive parents Trezell and Jacqueline West.
Even my parents say they, in that whatever 6 months they were supposed to be renting that house, they never once saw anybody. And their kitchen window like faces, the back of that house and everything. They're like at the back of the house several times a day. And they never saw anything or any lights on at night or anything.
Paula Thompson's dad and stepmom live right behind this wooden fence. They say they could see right into Jacqueline and Trezell West's old California City home, where the boys were first reported missing. But they say they never saw Orrin or Orson West or any kids here for that matter.
But I did always think that sounded really, really fishy. And even watching the interviews, like when it first happened and everything, like the body language and just, I don't know, they didn't seem emotional at all. They didn't seem distraught.
On the news, she claimed that she had never been interviewed by law enforcement. She claims that this is because she did not realize she was interviewed by law enforcement because the woman who interviewed her says it was for the law enforcement, not by. I don't know. She just seems like the kind of person that wanted to just place herself in the middle of everything and just kind of get some attention from it all. And to me, she just did not come across as a credible witness at all. Just very busybody but nothing solid. Because she would say something and she'd back up and go, "No, I don't know that for a fact. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure." She was just kind of, she was wishy washy. She was very wishy washy. Now, when defense was done and the DA came back up, she said, "My memory is bad in a lot of areas." When she was asked if she remembers the sequence of the events that night, Plant claims that she does not remember events well before explaining her version of the events on the night she noticed a man in the backyard behind hers. See, it's just not credible. She admits that she was nosy and looked through the fence, but the one thing that she was adamant about was that there were never children in that backyard. And then when she was done, they did a sidebar and then they closed court for the day. And apparently they're not coming back until next week. I don't know. Today was kind of to me. I really felt like the defense coming back with their questioning, they had a few good points. I mean, them trying to make the cop look as if he's not very thorough. I get that. Every good defense attorney is going to do that. And I think they got him on a couple of things. I think his being green did hurt him a little bit, or did hurt the prosecution in this case. However, I don't think it's enough, but I'm not a juror. So, but the whole reaching for, like, were you touching her leg, and just some of the crap that she asked about, she they're really going above and beyond to the defense. I will give them that. They're trying to pull everything out of the book. on this defense. So, you got to give them credit for doing their job. But because I do want to make a point that one of my subscribers did catch it for me. And I knew I would end up doing this. Every time I kept saying Orson, I would say instead of West, I would say Wells. Y'all remember Orson Welles? I mean, that just shows you my age. But so at any point, if you hear me say that, I don't mean that. I mean Orson West. But yeah, I knew I'd end up doing it at some point and then not catching it as I was trimming and editing the video. So that's it for this week, guys. Monday, Letitia's stock trial starts. So I'm just trying to decide what I want to do about that. I think rather than running a live stream with that trial, I'm going to be able to provide you guys more information by trying to stay on top of the West trial and also give highlights and stuff of Letitia's trial. So I think this is the best way to do it because I've already started this with the West. I want to see where this is going from the get go. This one has just the first time I saw those kids' faces, it just this case has me. And for a long time, everything went quiet on these little kids. I want to say, gosh, I'm trying to remember when it all happened. I'm trying to think of what happened. Oh, was it the Idaho murders that occurred that got everybody stirred up? Maybe it was the Idaho University murders. And then that's all you heard. And then it was just as if these little guys had just faded in the background. And I kept thinking, I can't wait till they go to court. So, yes, I will be staying on top of this one. All right. I know my long southern goodbyes, but I appreciate you guys for listening and hope you have a blessed weekend.